now we're going to talk about the hard part of the portfolio management job, program management job, and that's changing the organization's processes for doing projects. Because we can do a superb job at the project manager level and a superb job at the portfolio level, instilling a methodology and enforcing good assignment practices, securing authority for your project managers, making the right kind of assignments that motivate the people, all the things we've talked about. You can do a great job by that, but the organization initiates projects that require 3 times the resources it has to do projects. We're going to have a very high failure rate. And that is probably the situation that you have inherited when you walk into this job. Is there's no control over initiating projects, there's no prioritization, there's no allocation of resources, and so what we have is project managers competing with each other for resources because there's more hours required to do projects than we have available. So, despite having great skills at the project level and program level, we need to control the organization's processes, because what is probably going on is what happens in 80% of the organization. There's no control on initiation. Anybody who wants to start a project can. There's no control over setting priorities, what's the most important, so project managers compete with each other to get resources, and also compete with the functional managers who want their people to come back and do the work of their department. So we have a lack of priorities, lack of control of initiation, people don't know what to work on first, and as a result, 70% project failure rate. That's what you've inherited. It was you who took the job, not me, so don't blame me for this. But now we need to talk about how we go about fixing this and how we go about installing proper portfolio management processes in the organization. And it's not easy, because to do this right, your senior management group have to give up some of their decision-making prerogatives. They can't start a project whenever they want. Otherwise, we continue to have chaos. And in the simulation that goes with this module, you'll have to use all the ideas we talk about here and sell the idea of managing the portfolio of organizational projects. Having effective portfolio management starts with, and has to start with, controlling initiation of projects. No matter how well you do all the rest of the stuff, if we have an unending stream of new projects coming down, usually new priority number 1 projects coming out the pipeline, demanding resources, pulling them off existing projects, we're never going to get any better as an organization. And I think the way we sell this, and certainly the way I sell it to corporate executives when we're working on a consulting basis, is to take a look at and show them the failure rate of projects. What proportion of their projects don't deliver the planned scope and further exceed their budgets and exceed their schedule. And it is not unusual for us to encounter 70 or even 80% of the projects fail as defined by those criteria. So we're selling the idea of doing better, having a much higher proportion of projects succeed. And again, the way we do it is we sell this portfolio management as a project. And the MOS is 80% of the projects finish on time, within budget, and deliver their approved measure of success. That's the MOS. Then we back down into the various high-level achievements, the methodology we've been talking about for probably what seems like 6 months to you. I'm on the beach, so it's really gone fast. And so we have to have that focus and that objective, and it's pretty hard for an executive group to say, no, we want to keep doing what causes 80% of the projects to fail. I mean, you've got a nice position there if you're pushing it as a project which you and the executive group are working on. That tends to help you get over the fact that executives have to give up some of their prerogatives. And I promise you, people who have struggled and worked their way up to the level of vice president don't like being told they can't start a project whenever they want. And we've got a lot of arguments about why they think they should be able to do that. And your cornerstone here is improving the overall project success rate in the organization. And if you get some support from your chief executive officer, and they usually see the benefit, then you can use that to counterbalance the turf issues of, what do you mean I can't use my people and start a project whenever I want? You're going to have to deal with that one. The number one step, as I said, the control point we have to have is on project initiation. And there's a couple of key issues here. We can't just control initiation and manage a portfolio of the biggest projects. Because what portfolio management is the process of managing the resources that work on projects. And organizations have a lot of people who are assigned to projects. It is very typical to find that line managers, your first level supervisors, the people everybody wants on their project teams, may be spending half their time on project work and only half their time managing their unit or department. And we need to control that utilization and allocate those resources, and that's how you sell this. And you sell it by saying, wait a minute, we don't want first-line supervisors spending 80% of their time on projects because no one's setting priorities and no one's telling them what's most important. That's your argument for selling control of all the projects. So it isn't just the big ones. What we find when we look at the distribution of projects in an organization, it's not unusual that 40% of the projects, and more importantly, 40% of the resources that are doing work on projects are on small, what we call puppy projects. They take a week or two, and there's a gazillion of them. Large litters of puppies are spawned every year, and as you might expect, they make a mess on the carpet because people have many assignments on those projects, which takes away time from more strategically significant projects and may well prevent the organization from even conceiving high payoff, what we call porpoise projects, because no one has any time to think about it, much less do them. So that's why we have to control initiation, and your argument again is we need to rationalize the assignments people have on top of their real jobs, make sure our line management people aren't spending too much time on projects, and the time that they work on projects is in priority order. And we tell the executives, you're the ones who set the priorities. And that's how we bring about control in initiation. Okay, let's talk about what is the right way to do control of project initiation. And the key to it is it has to be a zero-sum game. Once we get the projects for the coming year or the coming 6 months laid out, and we assign resources to them, obviously all the resources are going to be assigned to projects. So it's a zero-sum game in the sense that any new project that comes along, emergency project, high priority project, if it requires 200 hours, 200 hours have to be kicked out of the project. So some other projects need to be canceled. That's what we mean by zero sum. If we have 15,000 hours of available time for project work between our staff people and our supervisors and so on, then we can't put 20,000 hours worth of work on the schedule because we're going to waste a hunk of time because we're not going to be able to finish all those projects. So that's why it has to be zero sum, and we need to set things up so that the executives buy into the idea. If they come in with a new high priority project, that's fine. But they also got to come through and tell us which ones to take out of the schedule. Lower priority projects, obviously. And another key to this thing is we work on the high priority projects first. So say we start in January, we've got our high priority projects, we start work on them. A new high priority project comes in February. We've got to find time to do it, but usually we can take it out of the second, third, and so forth priority tiers that we'll talk about, and we haven't started work on the projects we're going to cancel. So we bump things down to make room for the new project in our priority sequence, and so executives can get high priority projects done, but they have to play the game as a zero sum. They got to decide which ones come out as well. So how does the project initiation work? Well, a sponsor and a project manager get together, and the sponsor has an idea, and the project manager helps develop a measure of success. We have to have that before we can even consider the project. We don't just accept an acronym and go ahead and put it into the portfolio. So the sponsor and the project manager have put together the start of a broad brush plan that we've talked about a couple modules back. And they have a measure of success, high-level achievement network where they're laying out the business benefit the project's going to produce. And then the project manager, and again working with this executive, make estimates, order of magnitude estimates, which you may recall we talked about, of how much resource this project is going to require. Now, we're not giving a precise 1,743 hours. What we're doing is giving a range. And so the priority decision, where this project fits in the priorities, is based on the measure of success, the business value the sponsor is committed to for this project, and the number of hours or the dollars of labor that it will cost to deliver that measure of success. That's how executives make the priority decisions. And the first time around, it is not easy. You have to be part of the process. You probably should be part of the process every time it happens. But executives do this in every professional firm in the world. They got all their accountants, architects, engineers, computer programmers assigned to projects. They bring in a new client. They have to change the priorities and change the schedule. So this is something that happens very frequently. The best organizations, in terms of project performance, do it as a routine matter. It's hard the first time. Executives get into that, well, these are my people, I should be able to decide what project they work on, but we need to convince them that the only way to have control of the portfolio is to go through this initiation process. It starts off as highly political, and very quickly, and the more intelligent the people, the faster it happens. All these executives understand that when somebody else comes in with a new project they have to do for their area of accountability, it is very wise to sacrifice one of your projects that's not so important to make room for that other executive's project. And the way people play it, and I as a partner in one of the major accounting and consulting firms did this for years, I always wanted to come into that Friday meeting with everybody at the table owing me for a favor I had done them for one of their projects, one of their new clients, so that when I needed something, I could call in the chicks. And good executives quickly learn that's the way we play the game, and that's the way we wind up with a portfolio of projects that yields the most organization benefits. You have to sell this. They're not going to like it in the beginning, but we have to have that control of initiation, and no project starts that hasn't gone through this acceptance process where the executives say, okay, here's the priority we're going to assign to this project, and here's where it fits, so here's when we can start it. You have to have that process before we start work, even if the project happens within a department using only people from that department. We have to include that because those people are working on other projects for other departments, and we need to manage the overall resource and workload on people. And that's another argument you'll use in selling this process. In many organizations, it's very easy to find examples of good people we have driven out of the organization who've gone someplace else because we were asking them to work 60 hours a week because they were on 17 different projects. So they were so good, everybody wanted them. If we don't allocate resources, you drive some of your best people out of the organization, and that's another selling point you can use for convincing an executive group to go through a proper process of project initiation. So you've written a project protocol, and the first requirement in it is that people follow the initiation process, and no work can be done on projects if they don't. So sponsor and executives, as I said, get together, MOS, high-level achievement network, resource requirements, and that broad brush plan and a very rough schedule of when they want the resources is what is submitted and comes into the project office, whether it's called that or not. Project office intakes these initiation requests, and they may assess them and give the executives a summary of them, and periodically your decision makers meet to assign new priorities to brand new projects and fit them into the priority sequence and kick out what can't be there anymore. Now, in the beginning, we sell it that way. Every week, you're going to sit down and decide which projects are what priority and so forth. After you get it going, after people learn to play the game, after they learn that you are not going to screw them in terms of their resources, they usually will allow the portfolio manager to take over a lot of this decision making, and maybe the senior management group is only involved in shuffling priorities at the very highest level. We'll have a 7-tier priority structure. That always works best. And they may only want to work in the top 2 priorities, and they let you take over the rest. And that's fine. And you can make your deals and do some horse trading with executives to get their cooperation, and that's perfect. And that's the oil that keeps the whole machine working. When a project is accepted into the portfolio, we assign resources to it. We go through the process of people having to deal with the availability of the individuals they want. So, as an example, if everybody wants Sally, who's a great performer, and they all want her on their projects, well, odds are Sally's going to be assigned to very high-level projects and may have a calendar that is full for 9 months. And so the project office gives the project manager and sponsor a choice. You can have Sally starting 8 months from now, which may put your whole project out, or you can have Dick, who no one wants on their project, and he's frankly is available this afternoon. And they make that choice of availability of a preferred resource versus when they can have that person. And that is exactly the way this should be done, where the decisions about who's working on what are made at the highest level, not by the individual project team members. So that's how the process works. A new project gets accepted into the portfolio using software, and you'll practice this too before the end of the module, and we assign resources to the project and flesh out its schedule and send it back to the project manager so he or she knows when the resources are going to be available and when the project should start. We'll use Microsoft Project to do this resource allocation, and it will also schedule projects in priority order. So you may want to start next week, but you're a priority for a project, so you don't start for 5 months. And that, again, is the way things should work. The hard part of selling project initiation, just to cover it again, because this is the issue you have to deal with, is initiation has to cover all the projects, not just the big ones, because you can't leave 40% of the resources that work on projects outside the control envelope. That will rob resources from higher priority projects, and you won't know it. So you have to sell that idea that it has to be 100%. Some of the arguments you're going to get, and I hear these all the time, well, why should we overload those small projects with all this paperwork? And the answer is, it's not all that paperwork. At minimum, for a small project, we need a measure of success in how many hours of resources. And your project protocol, which we'll keep talking about, is a document, and it's the rules of the game for doing projects, and you are going to layer it in terms of what's required for small projects versus medium versus big, and you may even have more than 3 levels, depending on the size of the organization. But usually, projects that require less than 100 hours worth of somebody's time have to have just a measure of success, and that project manager and sponsor submit a one-line Microsoft project plan that captures that measure of success and the hours and the person they need it from. And that's what you put into your portfolio management process, and that's all they have to do. So it's not a lot of paperwork, and you need to be ready for that argument, because, boy, you always hear it. So we're going to scale up the amount of project management with the scale and significance of the projects. This project protocol is the rules of the road for doing projects in the organization. Everybody has to follow it. That's what you're selling here. We've talked about how you sell initiation, and there's some other things we're going to put in this project protocol. And if you're managing all the project managers, this is easy. If you're only managing some of them, it's a little harder. But we're laying out, every project is following a consistent methodology. We don't just have a nice-sounding acronym for projects. We have a measure of success. So somebody is accountable for a measured business result. Otherwise, it doesn't get approved. And this very quickly gets rid of about 1/3 of the inventory of projects in an organization, because when people think about it, they can't come up with the business benefit. So we want to have those rules of the road, having the measure of success, having a consistent project methodology. That's got to apply to all the projects. A couple other things go into this protocol. One, people have to report their time every week. Now, as we've talked about with the methodology here, we're not making project schedules that have hundreds of activities that are 10 minutes long. We're making relatively big assignments with a measured result as the deliverable, specifies the deliverable, and we're also estimating the hours worth of work. And we have to have that in the protocol too. We don't just have start and finish dates for our tasks, because your resource allocation won't work. So people report the time every week, and they estimate how many hours they have left on their in-process task. And the combination of all that, having plans that are built on estimates of work, and then we update those estimates of work every week in the status report, is what makes this system really fly. People are going to object. Well, I don't know how many hours of work are left. And we're saying, give us your best estimate and do it every week for a couple of months, and you'll get very, very good at it. We're going very easy on people in the beginning, so we get them established and set into the process of a new estimate to complete for their task every week. Okay, we got the data flow coming in. We got people giving us data on the initiation of new projects, and then we have to go through and prioritize them. And the way that works best, and we've done this in hundreds of organizations, is to use 7 tiers of priority, each tier holding about 15% of the organization's resources that can work on projects. Now, the way we come up with that number is we go meet with the functional managers, and how much time can your supervisors work on projects? Well, if they can work 20 hours a week, that's what we count them for. So it's just the hours available for project work. And we arrange 15% of those hours in each of the 7 tiers, and that's where we slot projects. When you sit down for the first time, people are going to want to pick the high priority projects, and that's perfect. And you slide them into priority level number 1, and until the resources are gone. They're all used up because they're assigned to the first 3 high priority projects. Then you drop down to priority level 2, and you move projects in until all the resources are used up, and then down to 3, 4, 5, and down to 7. Odds are, if you do this in December, like a lot of people do, for the coming fiscal year, if you're on a January fiscal year start, what happens is the priority 7 projects will never get started. They have low enough business value that new stuff will come in during the year and force them out. And that's why we want them down in 7, so we don't start work on them. So we use the 7 levels, and it's a zero-sum game, as I've said about 50 times. I can't put more projects into priority level 1 than there are hours available. Now, there's some fancy stuff we can do for a particular, government-mandated stuff. We may reserve all the hours in priority level 3 for those kinds of projects. You can do those sorts of things, but you cannot violate the zero-sum rules. If we got 2,000 hours of project work in priority level number 1, we can't put more than 2,000 hours of projects into it. That's the rule, and to put something else in there, one of those projects gets bumped down to priority 2, which may cause something in 2 to get bumped down to 3, and 3 down to 4, and so forth all the way till we get to the bottom, when some projects drop out of the priority list. We're not going to do them this year. Those are good decisions to make, and that's the way the process is going to work. Okay, let's talk about a practical example. An organization has 21,000 hours available for project work, and again, that's the amount their manager has approved for them to work on projects. It's not full-time, probably for anybody but maybe your IT people who are pretty much full-time on projects. So we add that up, we come up with that number 21,000, and then we have our 7 tiers, and each tier is going to have 3,000 hours. What is a very typical distribution after you've gone through the slotting of projects is you have 9,000 hours that take up the first 3 tiers, and those are your strategic initiatives for the year. You have another 3 tiers, 4, 5, and 6, that are for efficiency or quality improvement initiatives. And again, another 9,000 hours. And in 7, we have 3,000 hours available for everything else. And it's very likely that bottom tier won't ever get started because the benefits are so small compared to the other tiers. So that's a very typical way this may sort out, and we're in a situation, you've put the organization in a situation where it's expending its resources on the projects with the highest payoff, and the low payoff projects probably don't get done. Okay, you're phasing in the initiation processes, the prioritization processes, and the resource allocation that we've just been talking about, and that is starting to go. It takes people a while to get used to it. You're very gentle. What you're looking for is simple and 99% compliance, not fancy. People always want to make the status reports have more data, and then people won't do them. So you keep it simple in the beginning and get high compliance. That's always the winning strategy. Then we get into managing the portfolio, and that name is not an accident, because we want to look at the projects we're doing as if they were an investment portfolio. And we want to look at the value that is coming to the organization from those projects and be sure we have our resources assigned appropriately. Now we use a kind of a funny little grid to classify projects. The x-axis is the amount of resources that the project requires. So we have two cells that require a relatively small amount of resources, two cells that require a lot of resources. The y-axis, the up and down axis, is the value of the measure of success. And so we have at the top high payoff projects that are yielding a lot for the organization. And that gives us 4 cells. Down in the lower left-hand corner, not much resource, not much MOS value, we have our puppy projects. When we array organizations' portfolios, we very often find 40% of their person hours are being used in that puppy project cell. Those are projects that one department initiates for its own benefit or for the benefit of some other project. Not saying they're bad ideas, but 40% of your resources is a big hunk, particularly when you're not getting the strategic projects done. So the puppy projects are one target for portfolio management. I'll come back to them. Moving up a notch, still small resources, but real high measure of success value are what we call the porpoise projects, smartest fish in the sea. Those are the projects that have been very exquisitely defined. We get tremendous value and business benefit for a relatively small investment of resources. In most organizations, that cell is empty because no one has any time to do that kind of creative, strategic thinking to conceive those projects. You'll want to change that. Moving over, we have pig projects. Now we're getting to the resource requirements have grown substantially, but the measure of success value is about the same as one of the puppies. And these are pigs, and these are very often last year's priority number 1 that has changed scope 15 times since we started work. Now everybody's unclear what we're even trying to accomplish with it, but people work on it every day regardless. And we need to look at the pig projects and frankly look at either canceling them, sending the pig to the slaughterhouse, or at least slimming it down so it has a more defined measure of success, more defined benefits, and takes less resources. So we'll look at that as a source of resources for other projects. In the upper right-hand corner cell, we have our pachyderm projects. And those are the projects with high measure of success value and a lot of resources. And those are your major initiatives the organization is undertaking, and they occupy that cell. When we do portfolio management, what we're looking to do decrease the amount of resources expended on pigs, free them up to work on the pachyderms or on the porpoises. And we may have a mass slaughter in the beginning to get rid of these pig projects we've been working on for years, and they're just a complete waste now. Otherwise, we put them on a diet and free up some of the resources. We also go into the puppy quadrant, and we're going to put things together and go talk to an executive and say, hey, you know, I'm looking at the portfolio for your division, and we've got 7 of these little projects going on that all seem to be aimed at the same project and problem. Can you and I sit down and talk about this problem and see if we can't bundle those little puppies into a larger, more strategic initiative with maybe a higher priority and save some resources again? So we're talking to individual division heads, as an example, about bundling their puppy projects. And then last of all, we want to free up resources and project manager and executive time to conceive those porpoise projects, which have enormous payback for the organization. I've mentioned a couple of times the word project office, and it doesn't have to be a separate room. And we want to think about that as the place where all this data comes together and it provides decision-making information not only for you, but also for executives in the organization. There are a couple different kinds, 3 different kinds of project offices. The first one is a weather station. It gathers data and distributes it back out. Status reports come in from individuals, status reports on projects go out to decision makers. The weather station doesn't make any decisions. It's just processing data and telling you, yep, on project XJ17, it's sunny skies. We got rain over here. It's just giving you the information to make decisions. One level up from the weather station is the control tower. Now here, the operation is very similar to a control tower at an airport. And each project manager has a flight of a project with a budget and a measure of success and high-level achievements they have to hit, like being over Miami and then being over New York and then being over Portland, Maine. And those are the measured achievements it has to hit, and it has a certain amount of fuel in terms of a budget and a certain duration. And the control tower is watching all of the projects, identifying projects that are off target, off their baselines, and working with the project manager to solve the problem. So it's a much more active project office than the weather station is. Very typically, we start with the weather station and osmose up to control tower. So we have the weather station, the control tower, and then we have the project squadron, if you want to have a romantic sounding name. I'm thinking of those World War II pilots with a scarf over the shoulder. Anyway, the scarves aren't necessary. The project squadron, if you will, is when we have a control tower where suddenly all the project managers report into the project office. So it's doing control tower function as well as managing all the project managers, taking care of their training, being sure everybody has consistent methodology, that we're following it on every project. And so it's a control tower plus all the project managers is our fighter squadron, for lack of a better name. Before we get to the assignments, and you're going to have fun with the assignments on this module, we'll have a movie on the software and exactly how we make Microsoft Project jump through hoops and manage all of our resources based on the priority of the projects they're assigned to. So we'll cover the software steps because you're going to have to do that too, and then we'll move into the assignments for this module.